All right. Here we go. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another wonderful session of our Wednesday evening webinars. We're very excited that you're here with us, both those who are here with us live and those who are listening to us on our wonderful and ever-growing YouTube channel. We're grateful for you joining us. Tonight, I want to focus on something called the TIARA of Networking. It's not my acronym. It belongs to someone by the name of Steve Dalton. We will briefly talk about him in just a moment, a slide or two. What you may have noticed is that we have had a recent rebranding due to a very generous gift to Yeshiva University from the Glaubach family. And so we have recently been renamed the Shevet Glaubach Center for Career Strategy and Professional Development. And I'm excited that we are able to be one of the first presenters of our webinars, not the first, but among the first under our new name. So thank you again to the Glaubach family. We are gonna just recap this picture you may have seen a few times before. It was taken just over a year ago. Back in this where we were mostly in our offices. And this is our team. We abbreviated it to SGC. The SGC supports the leaders of tomorrow. Our students will be able to think strategically. So we're going to focus tonight on strategy, as we do many times. We talk about strategy. Think strategically about designing their careers while in college, at graduation, and for life. So without further ado, here's the mission. I'm not going to read it just to save a little bit of time tonight. We're approaching tomorrow evening as the holiday of Purim in the Jewish calendar. So I know that people's time this week is especially precious, but I will leave you for that to read, and we'll go straight into our presentation. Here's a few other things that we do at the SGC, and a couple of things. We're not really going to be talking about LinkedIn per se tonight, even though it's a major part of networking, but certainly what we will be talking about tonight is this final item over here, the networking strategy. So LinkedIn is certainly a big part of that, but it's not the be all and end all. And if anyone wants help on any of these items, they can feel free to contact us at any time. My email is very easy, daniel.coleman@yu.edu. And you can really email also careercenter@yu.edu. We now have a live chat during office hours, so plenty of different options for reaching the career advisors. So here we go. We're going to talk today a little bit, or not a little bit actually, we're going to talk sort of really have our focus of informational interviews. Now, without going into a precise definition, the way that we generally understand, or the way that I'd invite you to understand informational interviews, are where you are the one trying to get information out of someone else about a company, perhaps about an industry, and it really serves two functions. These type of interviews, you're, if you like, putting sometimes an employer or a professional in the hot seat rather than the other way around. There's a chance for really you to get as much information. And what I stress is that it's really about information. It's not necessarily, and I would encourage you all to consider it as an opportunity not to really to get the information rather than necessarily to say, okay, well, unless I get a job out of this, or unless I get an internship, this is all a waste of time. I certainly would not want anyone to think that. It's really about getting information, hence the name Informational Interviews. What's important to remember also is that you may have many of these, and you may think that, oh my goodness, like, and maybe people on the call like this, oh my goodness, how do I even begin informational interviews? How do I start networking? This all seems way too much, especially if you're someone like me who's generally more on the introverted scale. I'll give an example of a shul kiddush. Those who are familiar with like synagogue, a little part, a very, very important part, post services of congregation getting together over some food. For those that aren't familiar that may be watching this. And I tend to be, I think, the one off to the side, you know, with my kids, maybe helping them with some snacks or whatever, while my wife might be the extrovert, socializing with all the other people around. Now, we haven't had much socializing suddenly in public forums for about a year now, but you get the picture. Introverts generally get their energy from within, and extroverts often from without, and the environment beyond them. So how do we start to, excuse me, just 1 second. My office gets busy at times. Okay. So how do we begin to think about the purpose of informational interviews, and I would say have primary purposes. What is the outcome? What are we trying to achieve? Number one, we want to build our network. We want to build our allies. We want to build our network of people that could be potential advocates for us, or potential people that we might even be working with in the future. We want to create a great impression. And we also want to show that we're a cut above the rest. What do I mean by a cut above the rest? Well, there's different ways of looking at it. Number one, I would recommend to anybody, even in the process of applying to somewhere, that before they send off that application, before they even create the application, certainly before they write a cover letter, try and reach out to a couple of people at those particular companies. Because if you write in a cover letter, you say, you know, I'm really interested or excited about your company because you I identify with your values of, I'm just gonna make these up, integrity, honesty, and who knows, great work ethic, or I don't know, work-life balance, right? I identify with those. So, okay, good. You have shown that you've done a little bit of research, you've Googled, but it doesn't really show that you're like, have much more interests other than having Googled them. It doesn't really show that you're deeply sort of involved, that you deeply research the company, and that you know for certainty before you even submit the application that you'll be a great fit. It doesn't really show too much sort of creativity to just take some of the company values. I mean, it's a good start, but to take company values from the website and to kind of regurgitate them and say how much you identify with them on your cover letter. However, if you say, from speaking to people at your company, I really see how they live and embody the values of honesty, integrity, or something of that nature, right? You really show that you've taken that extra initiative to speak with people at the company. Then me, if I'm the hiring manager, I'm going to say, wow, this person hasn't just kind of Googled us, which, you know, if you forgive the expression, any monkey can do. But you've actually taken the time to speak to people at my company. You showed, wow, this person's really invested and interested and got to know people at my company. I'm going to reciprocate by showing interest in him or her and reach out to them for an interview. So that's, I would say, one way that you can show that you're a cut above the rest. And if we're talking about perhaps you didn't do so much research before you didn't have any informational interviews and find out more about the company before you sent off the application, but at a minimum, if you get called for an interview, you're going to be doing a lot of research. And part of that research, an important part, is going to be, again, that informational interview, so that you can show that you're a cut above the rest. So some of the things you might be doing to research the company is to do some external research, again, going into that, you know, finding people that work at the company, be they alumni, be they others. Again, LinkedIn, not the subject necessarily of our talk tonight, but certainly a valuable tool in that process of research. You can review positive headlines, negative headline on their own websites or Google. You can even set Google alerts in the days before the interview to find out more about what is, you know, hot off the press about that company, or even about the particular person that you may be interviewing with. And ideally, all of this in the run-up to the interview is to be able to help you be prepared to answer some of the three big questions at interviews, which are the opening question, or what's usually the opening question always, but let's say 90-something% of the time, tell me about yourself. And often a variation, you're going to be asked of this question: why are you interested in our company? And or why are you interested in the industry in general? What got you interested in it? And what got you interested specifically in this part of the industry? So the more you can say, the more you can find out about exactly what the industry is, exactly what the role is, and so on. That's really going to be super helpful. And the insiders, people working in the company, are going to be the best people to be able to share some of the really current information. So let's continue to TIARA. And just before that, I want to pick up on two slides which I presented about a month ago as sort of a whole introduction. The workshop, for those that want to look for it on our YouTube channel, is called the 5-Hour Job Search in 45 Minutes. So that was the last webinar I gave in this series approximately a month ago at the end of January. And I put up these two slides. I put them again for those that may have missed it or want a refresher. Some people, obviously, we're trying to give some very practical take-homes. So consider that emails is not necessarily an essay. It's not a cover letter. You want to introduce yourself. You want to, before you even get into the informational networking, you want to connect with people. They may be strangers. They may not be people you know from synagogue or from church or mosque or from someone you maybe met on the bus or on an airplane and had a great conversation with. They may be sort of total strangers, friends of friends. So always keep it short. And as I like to say, less is more. The more words gives you more opportunity to make errors. Booster is a word that you'll have to go back to understand more or read Steve Dalton's book. But as you can sort of imagine, you don't want to alienate people before they even begin to speak to you with long, lengthy emails. Don't mention jobs. This is going to be a theme for tonight. And if I forget to mention that again, it's all about information. It's not necessarily about getting a job out of it. It's really about getting people that are advocates, getting people that will relate to you, that can be allies along the way, that can maybe help down the road to inform you of openings either in their company or maybe with a colleague or someone they know from the industry. So again, if you're mentioning you want to reach out to learn about jobs at the company or to learn about the what vacancies are at the company, however you phrase it, do not do that. Here, it's unnecessary. As we know, boosters know you're looking, and it can be intimidating. People might say, well, you know what, I don't even know. Maybe they're relatively new to the company. Maybe they have nothing to do with HR. They really don't know you. Why would they even recommend you for a job or a vacancy? So, that would make people less likely to respond. Connection, if you got a referral, which is the ideal way to go to that person, that will go first, right? Mention the mutual contact, mention the person that they know that referred you. Generalize your interest, right? Again, they may not, there may be nothing at their firm in particular. So tell them in general, again, not mentioning jobs, but say you're exploring the industry, you're very interested in learning more about the industry, and don't mention it specifically that the conversation is specifically regarding that. Of course, if you do have an interview coming up the following week, you've already at the interview stage and you have an interview coming up and you really want to learn some of the technicals, you could say that's certainly appropriate at that stage to say, I know you work in the, for the team that I have an interview. I'm excited to say I have an interview next week and I would love just 15 minutes of your time to learn more about the particular environment that you're operating in. So in such a case, if you do have you already have an interview lined up, then that is perfectly okay to get some expertise and to ask them more specifics about the company. Maintain control of follow-up. What do I mean by that? Well, let's use an example and that will help us. Here we go. I'm just using an example of a data analytics student, but it could be anyone, someone in medicine, someone in law, someone in cybersecurity, who knows what. And here we go. Dear Mr. Jones, I'm a sophomore reaching out at the suggestion of, I just made up this name, but you can see you put in the referral, right? The person who referred you. Hopefully they know Shlomo Baxter pretty well. And I would love 20 minutes of your time. You notice it's not a great ask. It's not I'd love 3 hours of your time, just a little bit of your time to ask about your experience with, in this case, IBM, right? Here's the case where they did mention the specific company, but notice they qualified it. They didn't say, I'm just asking about IBM. They said, I'm trying to learn more about analytics career at technology companies. So they broadened the ask to say, yeah, I'm interested in the company, but also very broadly in technology. I realize this may be a busy time, so if we're unable to connect this week, I'll try again next week. Okay, so don't send this on a Thursday and say, I want to meet with you this week, because that's like a little awkward. But suddenly you could adjust the email and say in the next week or so. But that means you get control of the follow-up. You're able to say a week later, if you haven't heard anything, to reach back out and to say, I know last week may have been a really crazy week, especially if it's someone that's Jewish and they celebrated the holiday. You might say, especially with Purim. But I'm wondering if this week is a little bit easier. Still love to connect, even if it's just for, maybe you'll go down to 15 minutes, even just for 15 minutes. So that's an example, a sort of a concrete example, a short email. I did a word count a month ago, but I forget, and I'm not going to count them all out now, but you'll have to take my word for it that it's under 100 words. And that's a good example of something very concise. Okay, here we go. Diving straight into TIARA with an idea that this can demystify the job search, or at least part of it, the networking part of the job search. This is the book, if you're looking out for it or you're interested. It's called The 2-Hour Job Search, Using Tech to Get the Right Job Faster. And I'm focusing on a very sort of narrow aspects that's in order to get people into the frame of mind of, well, how do I even go? How do I even begin. Whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, you may not be used to this. So how do I even begin finding out information from someone? Let's say my emails worked, the emails that I just showed on the previous slide. I send them to a variety of people, maybe 20%, maybe even 50% of people responded positively. Sure, I'm happy to meet you, meet with you or speak with you. And you set up some time and now you're like, okay, that's great. I got time with these people at these companies. Who do I, or how do I structure the conversation? And what do I even ask them now that I have their attention? So again, going back to the aims of the conversation, it should be to build rapport and to gain some usable information. You want to come out with, no one wants to feel that their time is wasted. And that's where TIARA comes in. So without further ado, here we go. What is it? Well, it's a 5-part structure for an informational interview, for a conversation with an industry professional, and it involves, here we go, the T for trends, I for insights, A for advice, and R for resources, and A for assignments. So let's dive in for T, trends. So these might be a couple of examples when you're in the trends section of what you might ask them. Again, it's not exclusive. You don't have to use the exact words, but certainly a good framework to think about and to actually be asking and finding out what are the current trends in your industry. And the second question, or another sort of version of this question or something else, you may want to consider asking, again, depending on how much time partly that they've agreed to, you want to obviously budget your time, right? If you only have 20 minutes and you've got to get through the whole TIARA, you can do the math better than myself, perhaps, but you've got about 4 minutes for each section of TIARA. So you don't want to pack in hundreds of questions, but you certainly want to come out with a better understanding of what are some of the key trends that this, from the viewpoint of this industry professional, what do they perceive, what's happening in the industry? The last thing that you want is to go into an industry that's actually really dying, or, perhaps if you're someone that's not so excited about change and they tell you, well, the trends are like, it's hard to tell you the trends, they're changing like every month there's a different trend, or things are changing so quickly. Now, some people might be really excited about that. You may not be. So that may already be some good information before you've even got to the rest of them. That's some great information that you've got out of the interview in the first 4 minutes or the first 2 minutes even. How has your business changed most since you started? So if they've been there for a few years, you might even ask them, you get a sense of, is the job that I'm signing up for, is what's in the job description that I might have even seen advertised at a similar company, is that actually what they do day to day? So you'll get perhaps a little sense for that from this question. And how do you think it will change in the future? Maybe it hasn't changed much in the last few years since they've been there, but maybe especially because of Corona, or maybe because of, who knows, Middle East peace, right? There could be a lot of opportunities, business opportunities let's say, with countries that are making peace with Israel, for those that are interested in sort of Middle East politics and so on. Maybe there's a lot of change to come. There hasn't been much in the past 20, 30 years, but now there's going to be a huge amount of trade with those companies. How will that impact this particular business, and so on? So there could be various macro and micro changes, which it would be great to get information about. Let's move on to the I for insights. What is the best lesson you've learned, right? You want to know a little bit, and it may or may not be directly industry related. It could be, again, a way to actually build rapport. That's part of your, I would encourage a little bit of small talk at the first part of your interview, but it doesn't have to be like, okay, I finished the small talk and now that's it for the rest of the conversation. You can be picking up sort of some gems, I like to say, along the way, that will help you with sort of further small talk, or to reopen a conversation with the same professional several weeks or even months later. So definitely asking this question, I think, is very valuable. And speaking of valuable, you'll see the next one. What's been your most valuable experience with your employer so far, and why? Right? What are they? It's a way of perhaps understanding what's been valuable to them in their own personal, or I should say, professional growth and trajectory. And also, having an understanding of, does the company even value giving employees opportunities to perhaps be enriched and get nourishment from their work as well. So asking something along those lines, again, you don't have to use those exact words, can be very valuable. And then obviously, the last question there is an attempt to find out what are the key skills and traits. If I had to work, it's another way perhaps of asking, if I had to work on one thing, what would it be? By asking them, what are the key skills to which you'd attribute your success? And by the way, those skills, if you don't have that skill, and you get a sense that this skill is really integral, really important to that particular employer, then I would recommend, that you have some great information now to be able to work on for the future. And if you do have the skill already and it's not on your LinkedIn profile under the list of skills, maybe you've only got 10 or 12 skills there, maybe you've even got 30 skills, which, by the way, we recommend, adding skills. If you have the skills, add them. You don't have to, what's the word, budget your skills on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if they do have a particular cap, but you can certainly put a lot of different skills. And we encourage you, if they tell you a skill that's integral to someone's success of the company, and you haven't yet got that on your profile, you may well want to add that or even refer to that in your cover letter, if that's if you're having an informational interview before you're even applying to that particular role or that particular that particular company, I should say, or that particular industry. And be sure to mention that skill. And it may not be something that's sort of explicitly mentioned in the job description. And that could well be appreciated by the hiring manager. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, we haven't even emphasized that. This guy has that skill, and that's cool. So that is the I in TIARA. Let's move on to our next one, the A, the advice. What can I be doing right now to prepare myself for a career in this field? So, a moment ago, we talked about what is the skill or traits, right? What's the one skill? Maybe it's, let's say, presentation skills, right? And so maybe you need some extra, maybe you want to sign up for something like Toastmasters to do some public speaking. Or you realize, well, I'm pretty good at PowerPoint, but maybe I could even take my skills to the next level, because that's going to be really useful to, or maybe it's using Prezi or some other type of skill as well. So what I would do is here is giving you something very concrete and addressing, what else? What can I be doing right now to help prepare myself, right? Maybe it's not a particular skill per se. Maybe it's some sort of knowledge base. Maybe it's some programming. Maybe it's learning Spanish. Maybe it's who knows what. But asking that question will help you to understand and to learn a little bit more about where your gaps might be. The next one is, again, something relevant if you're asking someone before your job interview, what should I be sure to do within the first 30 days, right? So you're asking someone, you could well be asked in an interview, if we hire you, what would you prioritize, or what would you do during your first 90 days? Now, often this is a question that's asked to more senior applicants, someone that's maybe applying to a mid-level or senior level position in the company. However, certainly it's something good to think about. What are the priorities? What were the priorities of this particular individual? You get to learn a little bit about them, and you get to learn about what can be ways that you can really get off to a good footing, assuming you do get the role. So certainly a great question to ask for anyone that may be going for an interview at that company. And what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were my age or in my position? They know now, and they're like, oh my goodness, I wish I would have taken a little bit more programming while I was in college, or I wish I would have, to reuse our example from before, practiced more public speaking. The knowledge will come. You'll get all the training on the job. Maybe you don't need any more programming. You don't need any more foreign languages. You don't need any particular extra skills beyond what you're learning in college. But perhaps it's something like presentation or and so on. So those are or maybe it's conflict resolution, or maybe it's how do I negotiate negotiation with clients and so on. So another great question to ask. And we are already 4/5 of the way through it. Resources. What resources should I be sure to look into next, or what next steps would you recommend for someone in my situation? So it's really important to not just to come out of a conversation for yourself, okay, like now, what are my next steps? But to actually perhaps get some clarity and to actually ask the question to the person that you're interviewing, to your interviewee, I like to say, to ask them, what would you recommend to me? And if they say, as I suggested there at the bottom, if interviewee asks what kind of resources you're looking for, don't say, well, I could use like 5 more contacts, right? I could use different people to speak to. I mean, that may be appropriate under certain limited circumstances, like, you might say, well, you mentioned earlier that there's a different side of the business that I haven't even considered before. Would you be able to direct me to someone that I could speak to more to learn about that side of the business, right? So that's certainly something very appropriate, but not just to say, well, open up your contact list and give me 5 more people. I just want to have more conversations, right? You want to be much more targeted. And also you want to learn, what are the resources that they use day to day? What helps them in the job? What should I be reading, right? So this is the kind of question I ask at the bottom. What resources, such as websites, blogs, magazines, right? What do you read regularly in your industry, or what national or professional associations do you belong to, right? Because those associations could help you out. There might even be an upcoming event that they're having where you could help you in further networking or learning more about aspects of the industry. So if you can ask about the resources that they tend to refer to, then that will help you in terms of getting more prepared for the future industry that you're targeting. And finally, this isn't quite our final slide, but it's the final part of TIARA. Thinking about assignments, what projects have you done that you felt added the most value? Or have any projects increased in popularity recently at your organization? Or perhaps what projects have interns done in the past, right? If you're asking, your goal is to get an internship at a company such as this, so you might say, just to learn a little bit more about the types of projects that they give to interns. So that's a great question to ask. This especially can be useful when you're preparing for a job interview, because they may ask you, how can you add value? They might not use those exact words, but they might say, well, what makes you different? Or what is it that, you bring to this particular role? And if you've done your preparation, if you've done your TIARA, you've done your homework part of it, then you'll say, well, I learned recently that some of your interns last year were very engaged in XYZ, a particular type of project. Maybe it's valuation of certain parts of the industry, let's say the healthcare industry, something like that. So you might say, oh, okay, I learned that was what they did last year. And it's actually interesting because I took a course in healthcare management, or my recent, my last year's internship was actually in the healthcare arena. I've been doing more and more research on my own in terms of finding out. I have a great interest in healthcare. And I think, this type of project is going to come up again. I could really apply myself and the knowledge that I've been learning recently, both on my own and in terms of my actual sort of work experience as well. So you can really talk about, you can anticipate some of the questions at the interview and be able to draw on the knowledge that you've gained from speaking to people at the company. So, as I said, I'm going to try and keep it short for today. So really what I'm going to leave you with is, for those that haven't already trialed YU MVP, this currently is in its, still I would say in its pilot stage with our undergraduates. So it's not yet rolled out and available yet for our graduate students, but hopefully that will come soon on the horizon. But certainly our undergraduates have no reason not to sign up for YU MVP. It's a great practice to reach out to people that are really primed to help you. They're there. It's not like you're reaching out cold to someone that you've never met before, or a friend. There are people that have actually volunteered. MVP stands for Mentoring Volunteer Program. They have volunteered to spend time explaining to you or sharing some of their expertise in the industry. So it's a great way to practice informational interviewing, and not just sort of practice, but to get real valuable information, and to start with people that are sort of in the broader YU circle already. And again, are there sort of, they've volunteered of their time to respond to outreach from current students. Also, I would say to review your LinkedIn profile to strengthen that. And if you need help with that, or how do I leverage it, or how do I even start, we're happy just to arrange an appointment with an advisor. Reach out to us. We are more than happy to help with that. LinkedIn, obviously, in addition to email, being a great tool to reach out to professionals to set up informational interviews. Some of our most successful students are the ones that have continually, not just, had sort of a spurt where they gathered the courage and had those interviews. And by the way, many of our students are speaking, English is their second language, and they've really excelled in reaching out. And part of their hesitancy and networking wasn't necessarily because, they felt uncomfortable with it. Perhaps in their culture, it was actually something that they were almost used to doing, or grew up with speaking to strangers. I know where I grew up, it was more don't speak to strangers. So it took me a while to warm to the concept of informational interviewing. But I would definitely say, many of our students have really, especially from different cultures, have sometimes an extra challenges in terms of their outreach and networking. And I would say among them, there've been many who are very successful. They may have started small, reached out to a few people, had a couple of conversations, next week reached out, but they've really built on their successes, and they've also been able to take some failures and no answers, or people ghosting them, people initially responding and then maybe not being able to actually sort of seal the deal, and they've really persevered and had some great conversations on an ongoing basis. And this type of informational interviewing does not have to stop when you get a job as well. Not the subject of our talk tonight, but it's a great life skill to have. So that is pretty much, here are some links for those that want to arrange an appointment with an advisor. This is actually the best way. Just log into YUCL. If you haven't updated your profile for a while, it may ask you a few questions to update it and full functionality back in terms of seeing our upcoming events and so on. Those are also available upcoming events on the YU calendar, but on YUCL, on our career portal, you can see some internship and job postings. There's more being added every week. It's certainly not too late to apply for internships, but the earlier the better, certainly for those that are still considering this summer. We are, like I mentioned, this is the address for YU MVP, and this is to join it's really not a Canvas course, it's more like a Canvas page where we have plenty of great resources for strengthening LinkedIn profiles, resumes, cover letters, and we are happy to share those with anyone any YU student that logs into Canvas has access to all of those great resources. And with that, I'm going to conclude for tonight. I want to thank you. I see a couple of questions in the chat, which after I finish this recording, I will address. And again, wanted to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and wishing those that are celebrating a wonderful Purim, and looking forward to meeting with you either virtually or hopefully soon in person at the YU Career Center, now the Shevek Laubach Center for Career Strategy. Take care. Bye-bye.